Welcome back, one and all, to Scramble Drill. It is Josh here with the Starts of the Week episode. Going to knock this out really quickly before we get into the weekend, before we get into the games. How about last night, though? How about that Thursday night game where Kirk Cousins went over 500 yards and had 4 touchdowns? That was insane. It feels like the narrative thus far the entire season has just been how anemic offenses have been. And it was so nice to see the Falcons actually get things rolling a little bit, get Kirk Cousins sort of his feet back under him. I guess the other part of it too is you can tell he's still clearly not planting on that back foot, that Achilles. You just see that he's not fully confident yet, but for him to go out the way he did on Thursday night and get the win, dominate, it was so nice to see. And Drake London finally had himself an alpha wide receiver type of game. Kyle Pitts got involved. We can't get Bijan Robinson. We can't get the trifecta. Bijan was just fine. But it was just so nice. It was a breath of fresh air. Thursday night games, frankly, usually suck. And last night was awesome. It was a blast. Baker Mayfield just keeps doing Baker Mayfield things. Kirk Cousins was great. It was so much fun. So anyway, Thursday night was awesome. But let's hop into all of the things for the weekend. We've got some news coming out of the week. Davante Adams requested a trade from the Vegas Raiders. And this kind of comes along the heels of after week 3, they got destroyed by the Panthers. And Antonio Pierce said that apparently some players made some business decisions, so the Raiders were going to make business decisions of their own. I cannot imagine he meant Davante Adams was one of the individuals that made a business decision. Davante Adams is their best player. But Antonio Pierce did like an Instagram post that was hinting that Davante Adams might get traded. Very weird. Apparently now coaches are making their feelings felt on social media about their football teams, which is just amazing and so wonderful. So I don't know what to read into this other than the bare obvious facts that Davante Adams is probably going to get moved. The teams that he's been linked to thus far appear to be the Jets and the Saints, which makes sense. He wants to go play with quarterbacks he's played with before. I would die a little inside if he goes to the Saints, I'll be honest with you, because it would probably nuke my dreams of an amazing Chris Olave. Maybe he would just nuke Rashee Shaheed. That'd be great. I don't think anybody's counting on Rashee Shaheed to go win their leagues for him, but if he goes to the Jets, probably is good for the overall offense. The thing that I've noticed with the Jets so far is that Garrett Wilson, and I think this has been said this week, now that you've got 4 weeks where Garrett Wilson hasn't really dominated the way you would expect an alpha wide receiver to dominate, even against good defenses, even when he's clearly the sole focus and object of opposing defenses. You would sort of expect him to, figure some things out, to look good, and he hasn't yet. Davante Adams would instantly be a stud wide receiver 1 in there for the offense. Garrett Wilson would probably benefit from having somebody else to take away some of the focus from opposing defenses. He'd be an extremely elite wide receiver 2. I'm curious how this situation unfolds. I think Davante Adams gets moved. There's a lot of teams that would benefit from Davante Adams showing up on the roster and playing for him on Sundays. Namely, I know everybody's saying it, but the Chiefs could really use somebody of his skill set. They are little thin in the cupboard at wide receiver there for the Chiefs. Speaking of, Rashee Rice apparently has not yet confirmed that he tore his ACL. He was walking around without crutches the other day. The doctor who did the initial scans after the fact basically came out on Twitter and was like, I'll be damned, he didn't actually tear his ACL. It is fascinating because if you watch the play where Mahomes submarined him, it seemed pretty obvious you were going to have a significant knee injury there. He got placed on IR, but they're still holding out hope that it's not a season-ending injury for him. I guess at the minimum, he's out 4 weeks. I would still be pretty surprised if there's not at least, like 10 weeks sort of injury timeline here. That would be pretty shocking. The injury looked rough. I'm obviously not a doctor, though, so don't take my word for it. Let's jump here into the starts of the week. I've got 3 of them. And this is an interesting week because there's not any like clear and obvious ones. I know I've been picking on the Commanders defense in these starts of the week. I've been picking on the Panthers at points. I'm not doing that this week. You've also got that first set of bye weeks coming in to sort of ruin things for you. So we got that too. I jumped the gun. We have injuries first. Some things to note. Malik Neighbors is going to be out on Sunday. It was announced about 30 minutes ago. So dealing with that concussion, Malik Neighbors is going to miss Sunday. It does beg the question, does that make Wan'Dale Robinson an interesting flex play? They're playing the Seattle Seahawks. And thus far, Seattle's defense has looked good except that Lions game. They got eviscerated by the Lions. So you got to wonder, what is the truth about Seattle's defense? In parts of the season, I have thought they have looked very, very good on defense. In other parts, they've looked objectively awful. So I'm still not sure what the truth is about Seattle's defense. I would imagine Wan'Dale Robinson does not become all that interesting. Being the only receiver there, I think he's benefited so much from having a true number one on the other side of the field to sort of take away some of the opposing team's focus from Wan'Dale Robinson. So I don't think we should expect a whole lot from the Giants this week. I'll just say it that way. Other notes here. Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, questionable. Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert, and Brian Robinson Jr. also questionable. They have missed time so far this week. I think what will end up happening is Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor will be true game time decisions. I don't know which way they're leaning there. Trey Sermon would be the next man up if Jonathan Taylor's out, and he's probably a pretty good flex start this week. Joe Flacco is obviously great. Joe Flacco will be just fine if Anthony Richardson can't go, and they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, which has not been good so far. So that would be interesting. Joe Mixon is worth noting because he had that high ankle sprain, and he's missed 3 weeks now. Dameon Pierce, still not sure if he will play Sunday or not. I would not do the Cam Akers ride again. We've now had 2 straight weeks with Cam Akers being the quote-unquote guy for them, and he hasn't really delivered so far. So if Joe Mixon can't go, I don't think you're really excited about any of the options there in the Texans' backfield. Raheem Mostert probably just muddies the waters if he does play for Devon Achane, for other options in the offense, because the offense for the Dolphins right now stinks without Tua Tagovailoa. Brian Robinson Jr. is the one that I'd be interested in because he has been quite good as the Commanders' offense has sort of ramped up with Jaden Daniels. They've started stretching the field a little bit, and as they've gone on this stretch where they're just not punting anymore, they've decided that, we don't need to punt. We don't need a punter. We're going to score every drive. As that has sort of ramped up, Brian Robinson has obviously benefited, and he's been a key part of this thing, running the ball. I'll be interested to see what the offense looks like if he doesn't go, or if they go to the backup options there. But that's injuries. Here's starts of the week. This is a contingent start, this first one. Because if Anthony Richardson plays, I just have the reservations about the passing volume and how efficient he's going to be as a passer. At points, he looks awesome. And I know before he got injured this past week, he connected with Michael Pittman for 60 yards on 2 long throws. Michael Pittman ended up going over 100 with Flacco finishing things off. Michael Pittman, to me, is a 11, 12 target, 7, 8 catches type of week if Joe Flacco's the quarterback. And if you have... And Joe Flacco pushes the ball downfield. This is the other thing with Gardner Minshew last year. When Michael Pittman was killing it, when he was a top 15 must-start player every single week, when Gardner Minshew was the quarterback, they were not really pushing the ball downfield all that much. Joe Flacco comes in, and they're going to stretch the field. So some of the things that they're doing with play action with Anthony Richardson, they can still do those things with Joe Flacco. Obviously, you lose some of the electricity that Richardson potentially brings, but you also lose some of the downsides of him just doing dumb things. With Joe Flacco, I still think there's an opportunity for Michael Pittman to have massive fantasy upside, a top 5 type week, because he can still work over the middle of the field. He can still work deep. I would be very excited about Michael Pittman this week against the Jaguars if Joe Flacco's starting. If it's Richardson, I'd still want to start him, but I'd be scared. I would be nervous because those maybe 20 completions that you might get from Joe Flacco probably drop to like 13 with Anthony Richardson. And if you got 13 completions, is Michael Pittman going to catch 4 or 5 of them? And are those 4 or 5 catches going to turn into 70, 80 yards? It's a little hairy. And then you're betting on a touchdown. I think Michael Pittman can be a solid play this week if Joe Flacco is the quarterback without a touchdown. The other note here is Jacksonville is 26th against wide receivers. So I think regardless of who they were playing, I'd feel good about him. Being totally honest, I would not care who the matchup is. It also just happens to be that the matchup is very good this week. Zay Flowers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. This week is kind of tough to find those smash starts, the ones that are clear and obvious. It's like this guy's going to be amazing this week. There are not many of those, but Zay Flowers, and Zay Flowers, truthfully, it might be a total whiff just because you don't know who the Ravens are going to throw to in any given week. The things that I've noticed, though, you've got 4 games so far this year with the Ravens. You've got 2 games in neutral or down scripts where they're actually going to throw the ball. You've got 2 games where they've murdered their opponents. So in running scripts, they will run the ball. But in games where they're tight, they have thrown the ball at a fairly decent rate. And in those games where, in those 2 tight games, Zay Flowers has averaged 9 targets. He had 8 targets and 10 targets in the close games. In the 2 blowouts, that number drops to 3 targets. You have a 4-target and 2-target game, and obviously those are not workable for fantasy football. When they've blown people out, the only guy you could start is Derrick Henry. None of the pass catchers do anything. The bet for this game against Cincinnati, it's twofold. It's one, that Cincinnati's defense has not looked good so far. I think my grandma could throw for 300 yards on this defense. Their secondary just keeps getting eviscerated. And on the flip side, their offense looks like it's gotten its sea legs back under them, and they're desperate for a win. Joe Burrow is desperate for a win at this point in the season. So I think you're going to have a tight game here. Wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati actually ends up winning the game, but you got 2 teams that desperately need a win. You got 2 offenses that look like they could make Swiss cheese of the other defense. I wouldn't be shocked if this ends up being the fantasy matchup of the week where you have a game that goes over the 50-point total sort of week. I think this will be a really fun game. Zay Flowers is my bet for who would benefit from it, but at this point with the Ravens, can you really know? No, not really. It's a total crapshoot. But next, Keon Coleman versus the Houston Texans. This is another one of those. There's not a ton of clear and obvious starts this week, so you're looking at the high over-unders, the high point totals. And truly, this is Houston has manned up a lot thus far this season. They have played a lot of man. They've got good corners. They feel comfortable with their corners. And Keon Coleman is Buffalo's answer for man defense. They like Khalil Shakir versus zone. They like Dalton Kincaid versus zone. But they're going to let Josh Allen throw outside the hashes and throw bombs to Keon Coleman in man coverage. They feel like he can win in man situations. Well, this is a team, Texans tend to run man. They're also 19th in pass coverage so far by PFF, which they're not terrible, but they're not great either. It's a workable matchup, and it's one of those high over-under games where I think Keon Coleman could score a touchdown this week. I think Josh Allen could have himself a fantastic week this week against Houston. Keon Coleman is my bet for who would benefit from that. So that is the starts of the week. Fingers crossed. I hope they come through. And I'm so bummed we don't get another week of Malik Neighbors killing people. It's been so fun so far, but that's all I've got for the starts of the week. Best of luck this weekend in the matchups. I hope they come through for you. We'll see you next week when Ben and I are reacting to all the things, tilting, having a blast. We'll see you, everybody.